and welcome to the third panel of Video Stream Asia, organized by TVO Media. So the third panel is our topic for the third panel is basically production and distribution strategy. We have a wide variety of panelists again from different parts of the world who are going to talk about these two things in a very detailed manner. So let me first, try to introduce the panelists to you, and then I'll be providing an overview about what we're going to discuss, and then we can move on with the discussions. So thank you all panelists. I would just, request you all to kindly introduce yourself, starting with you, Lokesh.
Hey guys, really excited to be here and discussing some of the regional strategies here. My name is Lokesh. I head up the enterprise and OTT partnership at Adjust, which is a marketing platform where we connect the user acquisition campaign to the installs. So essentially, we provide attribution solutions geared on towards mobile as well as OTT. And prior to joining Adjust, I have an extensive OTT background, worked with a lot of linear and OTT attribution solution based in North America.
Thanks. Nikhil?
Hey, hi guys. This is Nikhil. I represent View. I'm based here in Singapore. I've been with View for quite some time now, since almost the beginning. And in my current role, I look at product and strategy. So happy to be part of the panel and share whatever insights that I can. Thanks for inviting.
Right. Zihar?
Hi guys, thanks Karan for the opportunity as well as Deepak. So I'm Zihar, so I'm predominantly from the cable and TV industry like from Sri Lanka. So currently I'm based out of Maldives, working for a telco here on the new OTT project. But prior to this, I was with Dialog in Sri Lanka, the largest DTH operator. And then before that, of course, with the first pay TV operator in Sri Lanka. So my background is pay TV, hardcore pay TV, and then have got evolved into the OTT space and the IPTV space and the content space. Looking forward for an interesting chat today, guys.
Juan? Juan, can you hear me? You're on mute, I think.
Yes, hello, everybody. So I'm Juan from Metra-Net. So I'm taking care of the digital content department. So basically, we currently have an Android TV service. So also we are one of the digital arm of Telkom. So we are representing and helping IndiHome and also Telkomsel to aggregate the content and bring the value to the whole group. So that's it from my end. Thank you.
Right. My name is Karan Torani. I'll be moderating this panel. I am Vice President with Elara Capital, doing research on the media and entertainment industry. Right. Thanks again all, and I just hope we'll have a fruitful discussion. So just to give you an overview, before we start, I think the discussion today will be primarily, limited, or probably we'll be focusing more in terms of tech, distribution, brand building, for the OTT, which is actually the production and distribution strategy. So, typically we've seen that broadcaster OTTs or homegrown OTTs in many of the countries have content as a focus. No doubt, content is king. But I think apart from content, we also need to focus upon two major aspects. One is brand building to get your customers directly through a B2C route. And the second thing is, of course, tech and user experience, which is a very, very important phenomena. I don't know, but many of the Indian-based OTTs, kind of ignore this fact and focus only on content. But the global giants, in my view, the global giants have either cracked this code right. Where if you look at the likes of Amazon, Netflix, they have the best user experience. They've got some of the best brand visibility, the brand recall within consumers. So as they say, content is king. But in my belief, distribution and user experience in King Kong actually. So I think these are very two important aspects which we need to study upon, and I've got a very wide variety of panelists again to discuss that. So let me just kickstart here with Nikhil here. Just to get some initial feelers in terms of tech initiatives for OTT. how much of an importance you think one has to give or one has to basically invest in terms of tech offerings, AI, getting to know your customer, and how can one actually create a balanced approach, from an OTT perspective?
Yeah. So here is how View looks at this space, right? We are in 17 markets today, right from Southeast Asia, so Indonesia, Philippines, Singapore, Hong Kong, this pocket. And then we are in the Middle East, so the whole of GCC, right from Saudi to Bahrain, Egypt in Africa, and then South Africa. So we are fairly diverse in terms of our geographic spread. But one thing that we do really well is that we are regionally relevant in every market that we go, which kind of reflects into the content proposition that we have and then the approach that we take. And the question that you had, right, or the question that you're trying to ask or spend time on is very relevant for us, because in every market that we operate in, we not only have to compete with, let's say, the likes of Netflix and Amazon and Disney, but also a lot of players from China and the regional players. So how do we remain sustainable in these markets, right? So there are three broad themes that we spend time on. One is how do we attract consumers, right? So that's how the whole journey begins. Second is how do we engage now that we have attracted consumers? And third is how do we monetize? So how does technology play a role in these three beyond content, right? So I'll not spend a lot of time in giving you all the boring details, but let me take a few examples on each of this. When it comes to attracting users, what matters really for an OTT service is whether you are ubiquitous, right? Today, the world is fragmented. The users are very demanding. They have multiple screens. They may have multiple connections, whether you are available across those screens. So View, because it started after the acquisition of ViewClip, which was a tech startup from the Silicon Valley. We have always been very strong, and we spent time on tech to, even before we had content, we had tech. So we ensured that we are available across all platforms and we are ubiquitous. So if somebody is on, let's say, on his pay TV, can we appear there, right? If somebody is on his tablet, on a TV, on any machine, can we appear there? So that's one, which is key factor, which is ubiquity. Second is that a lot of people now have started to recognize us because of the amazing content that we put forth, right? So we have, let's say, we very recently did Pretty Little Liars, Indonesian adaptation, right? Now, if someone who comes on Google and is aware of Pretty Little Liar as a brand, and if he searches for that content, we work with Google. In fact, we were the first 5 partners to work with Google very closely, so that he can, with one click, start the video experience on our platform. So the first theme was how do we attract users? How are we ubiquitous? If somebody wants to watch content that we have, how do we onboard him in the easiest manner? The second theme, and I'll maybe spend another 5 minutes on it, is how do we engage users? Most of the OTTs are spending a lot of money to acquire users, so the CPAs are fairly high for almost everyone. Also a function of competition. Once we have users, how do we ensure that we keep the user for the longest of time, right? We get the maximum lifetime from the user. What matters there, and I'll give you an example, maybe some of you have already experienced it. Let's say you are watching the topmost video on demand service on your television, and a lot of times you just keep on browsing through the homepage and you aren't really sure what content to start, right? So a lot of people find this very difficult. Consumers find this very difficult to commit to a content, and that problem is something that you can not just solve with content, right? I mean, everybody spend a lot on content, but how do we ensure that the relevant content is given to the consumer, right? If you spent like millions of dollars on content, and if your CFO finds out that, hey, not even like 100,000 users are watching that content, he's probably going to get a panic attack. And then if he discovers that, hey, some users could have actually enjoyed this content, but they are not finding it, in spite of that, he might get a heart attack, right? So we want to avoid such scenarios. So a lot of time and money spent to ensure how do we surface the best content which is personalized to the user, and it is not just limited to what you see on the homepage, right? It just goes beyond that. And the third part, which is very important from business perspective, is whether you can build a sustainable business, right? What we have done really well, and you've seen the lot of smaller players in the market disappear, is probably for this reason, which we did really well, is we had from the beginning a hybrid model. We had AWOD as well as SWOD, and we built both these stacks in parallel. Unlike a lot of copy what went behind SWOD, we did a fairly balanced approach. And one of the reasons why we remain agile in the market is because we have given the flexibility for every country, how much of AWOD and how much of SWOD do they want to give. Not just that, but how do they want to price the service in every market? Not just that, but how. Okay, so not just that, but how do you ensure that your pricing is personalized? So if somebody is on an iPad and he is on, if you detect him to be an engaged user, how do you try and upsell him on a yearly pack? And if somebody is on a small screen device and just starting to explore your service, is it possible to give him or nudge him to just take a daily pass? So those are some of the common tech horizontals that we work on to remain relevant in a market which is very, very competitive in all the 16 countries.
I think we lost you there, Nikhil, in terms of voice. I'll just come back to you and just move on to the next part of discussion. Juan, I'll be coming to you, on this content, on this distribution angle, basically, OTT and telecom distribution. Of course, we've always seen a case in point wherein the telcos, are the ones who actually drive the subscriber base on OTTs. What's it like in Indonesia and other emerging nations, in your view? Are telcos still very strong, a very strong distribution partner? And how does the arrangement work here? Given the content, given the user experience, what is the kind of weightage given by telcos towards these various aspects before they decide on the minimum guarantee or the rev share arrangement with the OTTs? Juan, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, you can go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Okay. So yeah, so from our point of view, so since there's big money or MG revenue share actually sustainable, so from our side is yes, if the partners can bring a sustainable value to the customer, because as you already all of you already know, for example, ViewClip, the global OTT players are entering the market, so there is a lot of competition. But on the other hand, we also prepared or has an initiative on how we can optimize we create the balance by optimizing our own local production, synergize with the internal department in the telecom group. So in that case, we can also create a unique value as well, besides spending for the content itself.
Right. So indeed, these MGs or these kind of big amount of money by the telco players towards OTT in terms of investments are sustainable, and that's something similar which you've seen in India as well. Zihar, let me come to you here in terms of the broadcasting part, since you've also been a part of linear TV for a long time. What are the trends in terms of cord cutting in emerging nations and also in Sri Lanka? That's one. And the second part is, in terms of broadcast OTTs, in India, we've seen a problem clearly. I'm not saying that Z5 is a bad platform as such, but we've seen the problem that the transition from linear broadcast to OTT is very, very different, right? In terms of the approach, strategy, content investment is higher. Everything is very different. So how are the kind of linear broadcasters adapting to this movement of linear to digital?
Actually, one is the market, the dynamics, right?
I think they're just audible. Can you just be a bit more loud here? Sorry. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little better. Yeah.
Is it better? Yeah. Okay. So I was saying there are two parts to it. So one is, if you take Sri Lanka, it's a very small island with about 20 million people and about 6 million households. And then you have a whole heap of FTA channels. And then, of course, the pay TV operations, which has been running from 1998 when we started, where we started with 10 channels to be on the bouquet, and then a very niche market. So that is how the pay TV industry started in Sri Lanka. So from there onwards to now, there has been tremendous growth. You know that there are more than 100 channels now, different mediums, not only cable, you have DTH, you have IPTV, you have OTT. So the industry has seen a massive evolve, have been evolving from day one. The industry has been educating the public, as well as now the public is well aware of what are the services available from the Western world, and they want it right here. So always where we saw the mismatch between the needs and the wants and the wallet share that they could spend for the particular service that they want. So if you take Sri Lanka, still of course we are a third world country, we're in the development pattern. So the demand for entertainment and content is very high. However, the expenditure that they could spare to obtain that particular entertainment is actually on a limited scale. So I remember during my Dialog days, I'm sure Nikhil, you will find it very interesting. So we were one of the first partners to take up View Clip from India. So they were one of the first partners whom we introduced on the mobile app. So the best part, I would say, what View Clip at that time, what you rightfully said, it's not only the content part, you had the technology before content, right? So you were one of the best partners that we had who were really looking at how this could be given to the common man's mobile phone. So not the smartphone, but of course, the earlier version of, how we could even at least deliver this content, even if you don't have a smartphone. So which we saw was a success only when we gave it to them in a big piece of sizes. Rather than we collecting an entire monthly rental, we said, look, you can subscribe for a day on a daily basis. Just see these, video clips, the fun video clips. And then, see if you like it, you could extend it, or you could have the weekly package and monthly package. So likewise, the market got developed very slowly, but today the market evolvement from the pay TV, the traditional sitting in front of the television at 7:30 to watch your famous program, the OTT, the buzz partners have come on board. So we see in Sri Lanka, the operators, the telcos, the bigger telcos, you take the largest telcos, Dialog to Mobitel to anybody who is actually on the forefront, have got themselves, evolved from having just a traditional content delivery platform to developing into deeper partnerships with partners like Netflix to, View to anybody who could come on board, where they are willing to share the pain of the cost. Because in the beginning stages, it was very high minimum guarantee. So I agree with Juan. So the industry was saying, look, if you want us, you need to pay us a minimum guarantee, a big number of dollars you need to pay whether you have business or not. But we see even that has got evolved now. So all new pay TV channels as well as OTT operators, whoever wants to come on board on a telco for DCB partnerships, they have become very adaptable. They have become very flexible, and they understand that it has to be a real partnership in order to go to the consumer. If they try to do that, on a high horse, sitting on their high horses, it has never worked. So we have seen partners who are coming on saying, look, this is what I want. If you don't give me access, I will go directly. But unfortunately, that going to the consumer directly at this part of the world have had different repercussions. I'm not saying it has not worked, but it will work. But of course, if you want to have a faster growth, you need to definitely make sure that you build bridges with partners. You have to, tie up with more number of people, more number of telcos. See, one of the arguments I always tell my telco engineers and my business partners is, look, what is the point in me being a bigger telco? Like, you're building a golden pipe if you don't have water inside it, I can say that, I have the best network, I have the best distribution, I have built a golden pipe. What's the point if I don't have water? Similarly, you might have the biggest water supply, but if you don't have a way to reach the customer, you also don't win, right? So it has to be a mutual partnership between the telcos, between the operators, between the distributors, the content suppliers, content aggregators, and the OTT operators. So we saw this success coming in only when these the mergers get together. All these giants, we get together, we have a consortium, then we reach the customer. That's one of the most effective ways. I hope I give you an overview, Karan. Karan, you're on mute, I think.
Yeah, very detailed and interesting insight indeed. Thanks, Zihar, for that. Tech investment, as I was telling earlier, that tech investment as a component of the overall spend is called an OTT, right from content distribution to tech. Tech is a very important part. Lokesh, if you can kind of highlight some kind of trends or some kind of numbers here in terms of tech investments, what percentage of overall investments, for a global OTT versus a local or Indian OTT is towards tech and user experience, and how has that evolved over a period of time? And of course, in terms of what kind of investments are these? I mean, are these investments like front loaded, that you have a larger larger amount of money being spent when you launch the OTT in that particular country or the nation to expand and then becomes slower? Or is it like an ongoing thing where you have to keep on investing a lot of amount of money and keep on innovating in terms of investment into the tech and AI?
Yeah, sure. So I can share some. I may not have some hard numbers, but I can share some of the themes that I've seen play out in the U.S. market, and I think U.S. market has been ahead in the curve, in the adoption curve, when it comes to the OTT, and I've seen the same story play out in the regions. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned. What has happened in the U.S. market. Also, the shift that Zihar touched upon from linear to OTT, as well as OTT investments in tech. So I would say the three themes that I've seen, number one is the content discovery, and Nikhil touched upon that too. That is supremely important. Content does remain the king, but there's a proliferation of good content over the last few years with the investments from these production houses, from Netflix, for example. So if you can't get your user or consumer to the content they want to watch, within a few minutes of being on the platform, you pretty much lost the customer. I think Netflix gives it a number of like, if they haven't found the right content for the user from 60 to 90 seconds, then the customer is gone, because they have options. There are so many other neighbor apps, as you call it, sitting on the CTV besides Netflix and the mobile devices. So recommendation engines are really critical, and a lot of investments are being made by all the OTT services into that. Number two, I would say and again, goes back to content discovery, right? To build the right content discovery is an AI play, but you can't build a good AI play without the data. So the second part of the equation is the building the data infrastructure, as well as the programmatic and ad tech stack that this AVOD supported players are building. So you need to really know your customer. So you need to have the infrastructure to collect all the demographics and the tits and pieces about who the users are, where they're coming from, what the interests are. So there's a lot of investments going into that. So that feeds back into the content discovery AI, but also plays into the targeted ads some of the services rely on. And so like you're capturing the first party data about your own users, then you also need some infrastructure on, if the brand's advertising on your platform, they should be able to bring their own data set, like the second and third party data set, marry that to the first party data set that the OTT services are capturing, so that you have really detailed view on the users and who you're trying to target. So data infrastructure is, I would say 2A, and 2B part is for the AVOD services specifically, I would say the programmatic stack, the real-time bidding, to be able to insert the ad, like server-side stitching, so that the user experience is seamless. Then they're watching the content, the ad doesn't seem just a little jarry and just doesn't really stand out. It seems part of the content. So there's a lot of investments going into that. And the third theme that I would highlight is the user acquisition itself, because it's a very competitive world right now, both in the AVOD and the SVOD services. So a lot of OTT services have been incumbent. A lot more OTT services are coming on board. So they're fighting for a finite number of users in every market. So to be able to understand what kind of users you're targeting, which users bring you the highest LTV, and which users are going to convert into, say, from a freemium to the SVOD model. So you need this very detailed, rich data set that comes from either user acquisition technologies and the user analytics. So that's where my company comes into the picture, because we have this SDK that integrates in the mobile devices as well as the OTT apps. So when somebody's trying to acquire a certain kind of users, they run this user acquisition campaigns. And we track how many of those people who are exposed to the ads in the user acquisition campaigns, how many of those are installing the apps, what actions they're taking within the app. so that you have really rich data set, you understand more about the users, and you can bridge the gap, and it helps in the user acquisition as well as the user retention. So yeah, that's what I would say the three things are, for me personally, what I've seen play out in the US market and other markets: content discovery, data infrastructure, and the user acquisition / user analytics.
Right, right. Very interesting on that one. I would like to also check with you on this data point regarding the programmatic advertising part. A lot of bots, a lot of frauds are there as well. So,
Yes.
how is an advertiser actually ensured that, the viewership or the eyeballs actually true in terms of nature? Anything being worked upon there globally? Because India, I know for a fact, this is a very big concern.
Yeah, that's a big concern in the US too. A lot of advertising dollars are getting lost. I saw an interesting article actually yesterday, which talked about like how much, like some fraud that was happening in Bulgaria. Somebody set up this paid user accounts for Spotify and played this streams on loop and just kind of defrauded. Didn't really technically defraud Spotify because they were still premium customers, but the advertising dollars did not go to the right right people. And in the OTT also, it is a big concern. It's slightly more convoluted than the display in the web because the technology is different, the distribution mechanisms are different. So there are different approaches to that. Like my company, Adjust, also has a few solutions around the fraud. So we track the performance fraud. We whitelist all the fraudulent IPs, for example, that where they have found the frauds originating from. And then we also have a very innovative solution around it's called Unbodify, to specifically gear towards bot that your question was originally about. So a lot of fraud that I've seen in the OTT is even though, especially in some of the markets like India, right? The one difference that I've seen is that there's a less of a CTV device consumption, more of a mobile device consumption. So a lot of mobile streaming is happening on the mobile devices. So anybody who can spoof a mobile device, can act like a mobile device, can technically divert the advertising dollars to that. So one solution that I think is a pretty clever solution that we came up with called Unbodify, very clever name also, or obvious. So we look at all the sensors and accelerometers in the mobile devices, because if somebody's watching something on mobile streaming and using it, technically they're kind of moving the mobile devices it's not going to stay stagnant for like 2 hours. But if you are spoofing a mobile device and are trying to fraud the advertising dollars, it's not going to move because it's not a mobile device technically. So we track all these different signals that we get from the mobile device and differentiate whether it's an actual mobile device or not. So that's another approach that we are taking. So there are a few different ways that you can go about it. But I agree with you. I think it's and it's becoming more of a concern as the advertising dollars shift from linear towards OTT, and they're big numbers. And as an industry, I think we need to kind of keep an eye out on it and come up with more solutions to kind of tackle this problem.
Right, very innovative techniques used abroad, I think, to kind of track the system and track the bots. Nikhil, let me bring you back here in the conversation. Can you also share your insights on customer retention, customer stickiness? So, firstly, what kind of content is something which gets the audience really hooked on to an OTT? Of course, it's web series, it's more binge watch nature kind of content, which keeps a loyal customer base and kind of you have a better conversion of your MAU into DAU because of that. But if you can highlight some kind of cost per acquisition on a customer basis, like how different it is when you go and acquire a customer directly through a B2C route, through marketing and other things put together, the kind of incentive scheme offers, and how different it is when you acquire the same customer through telco bundle package.
Yeah. So quite similar to what Lokesh was saying, right? The problem that we are all trying to address after we have got the user is how do we keep the user, how do we retain the user, right? And what really matters when it comes to retention is, let's say three things again. One is whether you got a right user in the first place, right? Because there are millions of users in every market and you may or may not be suited for every user. So are you acquiring right users to begin with? And that plays a big role. because let's say if I am working with one of the largest telecom providers in Indonesia, and if he has a compelling offer when it comes to View, like a funded offer where the subscription is going to be discounted, then there is a good reason for that user to continue the journey with us, right? So first is to acquire right set of users, and it is not just about having partnerships, but also when we spend money through Facebook and Google and various ad networks, are we really acquiring users who we want to begin with? So a lot of technology and operational excellence that goes into it. And it is not just about acquiring users, but also about reacquiring users. In the markets that we operate in, let's say in Egypt or Indonesia, right? People download your app, they spend maybe a couple of months with you, they uninstall, but then they install again, right? Because they do not want to keep like 4 apps at the same time. So when it comes to acquisition or the acquiring the right segment, you need to focus on both acquiring and reacquiring. And you have a very good chance if you are set, if you are technically set to lower the retargeting costs significantly, right? So that's one. How do you acquire the right user? The second part is that now that you have a user and you are giving him content, how do we deliver content, right? Let's assume that your content is amazing, right? You're producing or you're licensing amazing content. One of the things that we have realized is the content value proposition has to be crafted in a very coherent manner, because if you're known, let's say in a market like Indonesia or Philippines or any part of the Southeast Asia where we are known for Korean content, and when we acquire a user, he really expects us to deliver high-class Korean content. So is our our content proposition appearing coherent, right? Or if we are just randomly acquiring content, makes a lot of difference. I'll tell you one example. We have been operating in Southeast Asia for over 5 years. We have given amazing Korean content to our users, but then we started producing content also, right? We started owning the IP. So we built original content lineup. One of the things that we did to ensure that the content is coherent so that the users continue to spend time with us is to ensure that our fabric of content, even when it's an original content, remains very close to the Korean content. So the type of people that we would get in our shows to appear, or the stylization of shows or the storytelling, we kept it quite similar to the Korean content, though it was our own content, let's say in Bahasa in Indonesia. So coherence of content is very important. And to your point is frequency, right? Whether a user who has subscribed your service in, let's say, 1st of Jan and has probably spent a lot of time and minutes by 15th of Jan, is he likely to unsubscribe now? Or are you telling him that, hey, wait for another 20 days and there is some amazing content that is going to get released? So do you have those cliffhangers in the form of new shows that you can let people know of? And we do it very smartly. We use the advertising inventory in a very smart way. We don't lower the CPMs and give it out for advertisers below, let's say, X dollar is eCPM. We rather utilize that inventory to make our audience aware of some amazing shows that they are going to get next month, so that they have something to look forward to, right? So those are the ways that we spend to kind of retain the audience. When it comes to cost of acquisition per channel, it is actually not a function of a channel or how we acquire users, but how we acquire users and what type of content that we might make available to them. So it's probably 3 ways formula, right? You get the right user, get him the right content, and then try and that you have solved the user experience problem of discovery and everything that we spoke of, so that irrespective of a channel alone, your cost of acquisition remains lower because relatively your LTV is higher, right? So then that equation really works well if you take care of those 3 things together and not just on the user acquisition channel.
But yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. But how often, or basically, so to say, how much time in a week, or say in a month, or how many times? What are the kind of demographics or numbers there, wherein a consumer would actually look forward and want new content to keep up their subscription on the OTT platform?
Yeah. So if we do 2 things when we want to find out such answers, right? One is we talk to consumers. So we have an outreach program. So we, in every market, would do dipsticks, and we talk to users in a focus group and whatnot. The second is we look at our data, right? If we do the like a way of looking at our data in a more scientific manner, you would realize that people who, let's say, have top 20 percentile of retention, what are the type of things that they have done, right? And we found three things. I think it's going to be common across a lot of different types of product as well, but three things that matter to us and we want users to do those three things is one, DU, like DAU MAU ratio, right? Is he coming more often on your platform? And we have found out that if in first 7 days, if the user comes for 3 days, then he's already, in the green zone. So that's one. Second is how many individual pieces of content, and when I say individual pieces of content, how many unique shows or movies has the user sampled, right? And we have seen that if he sampled more than 3 in a span of 1 week, then he's already likely to be spending more time with you. And the third one is the engagement time, right? How much time is he spending on your platform? And we have a very fancy way of looking at this. And then naturally, some users give us lead indicators of the fact that, hey, those users are going to be part of that 20% bucket, and some users don't. So then what we do is we try and push those users to exhibit at least one of these 3 properties. And the answer, like finite numbers for each of the 3 activities that we want users to perform, would vary for every market to every market. For example, in Indonesia, the consumption is through the roof, right? Like they consume a lot, right? Our users are like consuming so much content that sometimes we wonder, wow, like how do they get so much time? But in Saudi, maybe not as much, right? But they still get retained fairly well. So the answer to your question from number perspective would vary from every country to every country. But the 3 activities that I said, which is DAU MAU, sampling, and the engagement in terms of minutes they spend on our platform, are very good representatives of how the user is going to spend on our platform in terms of retention.
Very good detailed perspective. Juan, I would have some points of discussion for you as well, given the partnership ecosystem, what you pointed out. You really said that, you clearly said that the MG-based system and your high payments from the telcos towards the content players, something which is sustainable for the near to medium term. And that's a statement which shows that, what is the kind of traction these OTTs are going to have in terms of SWOT revenues, backed by telcos in a very big way. But I would just like to get deeper into this topic and try to understand in terms of what are the kind of factors a telecom operator or a partner usually identifies with an OTT before they get into a MG route or a rev share route. Like for example, if you want to get into a MG route with a certain OTT, what are the kind of factors? Is it like the brand recall? Is it the AI? Is it the content? So what are the kind of key factors which you differentiate within OTTs for going into a rev share or an MG arrangement? Juan, are you there? I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from our side, so we are basically since we are representing a large one of the key telco in Indonesia, and we have a large of division which intersect, and we have the synergy solution as well. So in case of the latest OTT players which are in the midst of negotiating, one of the biggest player, we are looking at a coherent group strategy in terms of our internal telecom company itself. So for example, how can we maximize the value from the partner? For example, in terms of the B2B side, for example, the network cost, and also the flexibility of the B2C in terms of the retail packaging and stuff. So upcoming, there is a lot of some of the OTT partner are already in the pipeline and negotiating. So it's important for us to keep the service relevant to the customer, basically for all sides in terms of acquisition, activation, or retention, and also referral. So that's from our side.
Hey,
right, and how? Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, Nikhil, you
Go
want to
ahead.
add something? Please go on. Please add something.
Yeah. So one of the things that I remember one anecdote, right, from our initial days when we started partnering with telcos. So what we did was that we did a sort of a small study. We went into some of the telecom stores, right? They like stores that are owned by telecom players where they sell their connections, and we found out how they acquire users and why it makes a lot of sense to snap a view partnership, right? A view discounted offer with their either a new handset in the market like Singapore or with a connection. And we realized that most of the telecom carriers would have competing offers, right? It's also a fierce market. So the offering is fairly competitive, and it's also now getting very, very personalized. So what else can the telecom player do? I mean, I'm now talking about a sales guy who is manning a shop. What does he do to convince a guy to just take that like a 2-minute decision on switching the carrier or being on a carrier? And in most of the cases, 50% of the guys have made up their mind when they want to buy or subscribe to a line. They need a small nudge to just feel convinced that, hey, I made a right choice. And that is the time, right? At that point in time, the services like View, if he has already heard about it, if like say somebody's daughter or a wife is watching View, if he's told that, hey, you get 50% off on View or 3 months of View free, he actually makes that leap of faith, right? So from 50% confidence, he goes to, let's say, 85% confidence on the purchase. So the purchase pain kind of gets reduced. And the moment that happens in a country like Singapore, a user who comes on your network is going to give you like a serious amount of lifetime value. So it makes a lot of sense for carriers just from the point of view of user acquisition if they snap on a right kind of deal as a bundle deal when they acquire a user. I'm sure Juan can talk about a lot of other reasons why, from stickiness point of view from carrier, it would also make a sense. So I just thought I'll share this interesting thing that we discovered early when we started doing partnerships with our telecom carriers.
Right, very interesting. So you get to know the end consumer perspective from that in terms of what do they decide before selecting a particular telecom, and that will effectively you piggyback on that customer, and you'll get your benefit out of it. Lokesh, a very interesting point of discussion here also I would like to highlight is in terms of measurement. So we obviously mentioned about the fact that there's too much of bot, too much of fraud which is there. India, of course, we've got BARC, which measures TV. Globally, we've got many agencies like ComScore and so on and so forth, which measure a lot of data in terms of analytics, in terms of the time spent, consumption metrics put together. But there's been a common problem, by the producers that for whatever content they make, be it a movie content or be it a web series kind of content, whatever they commission for the OTTs, they do not have the exact feedback or the data. In terms of the success or the failure of a particular content, which kind of keeps them in a tricky situation in terms of what do they do from here on going ahead. Is our strategy, is our content strategy working, not working? So, is there any solution for this kind of a situation globally? Do you think SWORDs will eventually open up and share information and also share data with their producers for them to basically, be more comfortable in terms of what they're making and how to improvise on that?
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer because I see the problem getting worse than it's not getting solved. I guess and you're right. I think traditionally with the broadcast TV and Indian TV, it was slightly easier, right? There was just a few players in town, Nielsen in the US and the one that you mentioned in India, and very rudimentary solutions too, right? The GRP-based, panel-based solutions. And over time, as the smart TVs came along and OTT players came along, some new solutions came on the market. Like some of the smart TV guys, for example, they capture the glass level data. So they essentially get the watermarked content and do this automatic content recognition on what you're watching on the smart TVs, and they do the matching, and they have kind of create this, stitch this large data sets of the audiences, pretty much tied to the IP addresses, which can in turn also be tied to the other identity sets across mobile and web. So there are a few players in the US and across the world have kind of done that. Then there's some third-party players who I think they have partnership with some of the smart TVs guys like Samsungs and LGs, and they have their technologies embedded at the chip level in those smart TVs. So they're also collecting data. The problem is that it has become a little too fragmented over time. So some people are selling the panel-based data, some people are selling the ACR glass level data. And from what I've seen play out in the US market is that a couple of players who have created scale, say in the ACR data, they got about 10 to 15 million households that they're collecting data on. They found it was becoming super valuable to just kind of give it away to share with the outside world. So they kind of becoming almost like walled gardens themselves. Because if you have the user on the smart TV and you have a user interface, then you have opportunity to show your own ads. So instead of sharing the data for measurement outside the platforms, they're kind of moving towards using their own data to show better targeted ads or stitching the ads within the content themselves. So yeah, I don't have a good solution or I would say deeper insight to share around that. But I think the problem itself is kind of becoming worse. But if you're talking about measurement in general, I call measurement is like you mentioned the measurement, the content side, but there's also measurement on the business outcome side. For an advertising perspective, for example, there are two sides to the equation, right? How many people who watch the content, you need to measure that. What do they look like? And then you also need to measure the business outcome of people who are exposed to ad, what actions they took, what products did they buy, and how many apps did they install and everything. That's where we come into the play. So there's more clarity on this second other side of the equation because you have, we can have tech in the mobile apps. You have companies collecting data on the footfall traffic, for example, in the retail stores, or just capturing the website traffic upticks after the ad was aired. And you can also stitch all these different disparate data sets together. So there's more clarity and more technology on the other side. But unfortunately, on the measurement side, it seems a little too fragmented still. And to add to the problem, if you want to, in a large country like India or the US, for example, if you want to measure the national campaign, like how many people watch the content, so not only you need a large scale data set, but you also need the data to be evenly geographically distributed across the country so that you can make good statistical calculations on that. So that becomes another problem because in a lot of countries, there's not one US like cable operator kind of covers the entire region. Usually they're like regional monopolies that kind of play out. So it's an interesting world we're living in, but some problems are getting solved, some problems are getting worse, I would say.
Right, so we're still some time away from getting a globally accepted digital measurement system all over the world, right? I mean, the kind of investments you need to be large to actually, play out on this. And I mean, how much time away do you believe this could happen in the next 2-3 years? Because eventually, what's going to happen is that digital definitely is going to become very large. It's already large, but it's going to become even larger. And for advertisers to actually, kind of justify the kind of spends they're doing on digital, they need to have that more granular data. And I think Google, Facebook, all the large MNC social media companies, they work more on the faith and the trust factor what these advertisers have, rather than giving insights and detailed data. So the measurement system is something which is still in a very a big mess, I would say. So the kind of solutions will emerge over a period of time. Is that correct to assume?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very accurate observation. And if you look in the OTT world, then the Rokus and Hulus, they have aspirations to kind of become the Facebooks and Google of the world, right? Same walled garden, don't want to share the data outside the ecosystem. They want to capture the ad dollars, but they also want to measure it without using a third party. Having said that, they are certain ways they work with some of the third party vendors where we call them the self-attributing networks. So we, for example, capture some of the installs or some of the business outcome actions that happen, and then we send the data to Facebook and Google, and they claim themselves like how many of those installs were influenced by the ad inventory that they showed. And then we send all the data back to the advertiser again, like, hey, this is what we captured, this is what Facebook is telling you. And that's where we just kind of drop the not drop the ball, but like you make the decision whether how true is that. But having said that, I think it's having a consistent, it's hard to, at least at this moment, it's hard to have a system, a solution that measures this campaigns or advertising across platforms. You can, if you're buying programmatic inventory, for example, at least you can buy at the network level, and then your inventory might be shown across these different platforms, the Roku's as well as the Hulu's, because it's based on that ad spot within the. But in terms of the measurement, I think you're still reliant on, at least on the exposure side, if you're looking at how many people, who's watching that ad or the content, I guess you're still reliant mostly on this closed ecosystem that are evolving as we're talking about it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so let me add one very debatable angle to this, right? If you look at the dollars that we are going after, obviously the pie is going to increase, but there is a shift from the traditional, let's say, television or print or whatever to digital. Now, if you compare digital even today with television, I think we are very, very good and sophisticated, right? I mean, I have friends who I keep every time debating on the same topic. In India, for example, the viewership on television is decided by how many households, like 100,000 households that sample the data for the whole of India. And then we decide which television and which show is more popular. And then billions of dollars move there. It is statistically insignificant to, like, it's ridiculously insignificant when you decide spends of billions of dollars on the basis of this rudimentary sampling. On the other side, you have digital, where it is so fancy. I remember in 2010, when I started my conversation with brands, their requirements were so fancy. And my question to them was like, how do you really spend on TV and print, right? You don't ask so many segmentation questions and attribution questions.
They take digital for granted. They know that digital can provide this data to them. That's why they ask for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like you are being unreasonably unfair with people who are already providing you far more scientific reach than what you are doing currently. So it is just about, it's very funny when we look at it this way. And the problem is, I'm not saying that there is a problem of consistency. There could be a common currency that everybody would look at and believe. But in terms of coverage, I think digital is far sophisticated for it to not be a concern for anybody to begin the spend, right? It's almost like they find a reason to not spend on digital and come up with this new problem saying that, hey, how do I attribute this and how do I attribute that, right? Hey, but what are you doing on your core business and your core spends?
Yeah. Right.
And I think I'll just add to that, because I've seen that been discussed a lot in the US market too, and the TV players, they have own argument against it. And I think the prevalent sentiment in the TV market has been that because the digital is so sophisticated, and because the last action has been happening on digital, they're capturing the attribution and the fractional attribution that happens. So their argument is that we are the ones who are kind of making the customer aware, right? You took the example of if somebody knows about the app view, going and making a telecom decision, that kind of top of the funnel focus that has been on in the TV world. So they are driving the business outcome, but because the last touch point is happening on digital, they don't get the credit for that. And that's also the driver for like, hey, just let's make investments in OTT, which is more digital-like. We can capture all these data points. We can kind of make a different case for not thinking TV as a top of the funnel driver, but like a full funnel performance driver. So, but that's why there's an opportunity, and that's why we are here, I think, all talking about how nice this the world is evolving in TV.
Right. I just have one last question now. This is to Zihar, actually. The discussion on this entire AVOD market size. If you look at India, typically we are a sizable AVOD. Video advertising is growing because of smartphone penetration, cheaper data, all these demographics put together. It's the fastest growing within the digital advertising pie. I'm sure other emerging nations also, it will be a similar story when video consumption is taken off the roof. But unfortunately, the problem is that this AVOD pie of video is dominated in the likes of YouTube, which is a large share, and to some extent by sports broadcasters like Hotstar. The other broadcast OTT players are not able to kind of leverage upon or probably scale up in this AVOD base which is there. So can you also highlight some kind of trends, be it Sri Lanka or any other emerging nation, how this AVOD video market looks like? And are the linear broadcasters able to leverage upon this digital AVOD opportunity? And what are the kind of strategies adopted by them?
Actually, Karan, to give you a perspective on the Sri Lankan local market, the advertising, see, we are about $100 million market on advertising. Predominantly, we have been, as as Nikhil says, it has been always the TV with about 200 people's meter. The people decide, which channel to put, only with a small sample. But with digital coming in a couple of years before, we see that this trend is slightly shifting. Not at the speed that we wanted. I mean, with all the information that digital could provide, not at the speed that we wanted. But however, last year with COVID, we saw a bit of an acceleration on the digital advertising. Especially the multinationals. If you take Nestle's, Unilever, even my former company that I work for, Dialog, who are one of the biggest ad spenders, consciously made a decision a couple of years before that we will try out the digital plan. So it keeps coming back. Some of the questions that we asked all these digital advertising companies, so Nikhil is absolutely right. We were very curious. When they said, we can give you this, so we said, okay, fine. No, not only that, we want all these rest of the things. Can we track that? So absolutely, he's right. But then that trend, as I said, coming back, it was the shift from this 100 million, or rather the 100% of the pie, to the digital side was a very, very slow movement. We saw only about 4% were going in, then about 6% were going in. But last year, with COVID coming in, we saw a bit of a jump as people started to spend more on the digital advertising front. Yet, of course, the bigger pie is still on the FTA market, as you would rightfully know. It's still dominated with the local terrestrial broadcasters and all that. But coming back to the question of AVOD, how it is going to help, it is going to help tremendously. See, we found out on the ground level, the consumer is majority of the consumer. I mean, you have your, the niche consumers who will be paying any number of dollars to watch good content, subscribe to your Netflixes, Amazons of the world, and then, play that top dollar. Yes, that is actually on the very, very top tier of the pyramid. But if you take the middle and the bottom of the pyramid, they want, at least psychologically, right? This is something that we really found out. They do not want to spend on both. They don't want to spend on content as well as on data. However, if you bundle this together and tell them, look, you take this pack, we give you Netflix on it. You take this pack, we give you View on it. You take this pack, we have these things coming in as a bundle. Then psychologically, they think that, okay, I'm spending only for this. But the moment they had to spend for data as well as for content separately, it became a bit of a mess. So that's where the new OTT providers, coming in with AVOD, even putting up to a certain level of freemium, made exact sense that this will be the right path to go, where you have these partnerships building in to get into the consumers, majority of the consumers. I mean, not the top level of the pyramid, but if you want to reach the masses, you need to, get into this AVOD mechanism in order to make it successful. That's what my general sense is, from the telco side of things.
Right. So definitely. So I think some of the key takeaways to summarize this panel was that, freemium is the way to go ahead. Of course, you can't go pure play SVOD or AVOD. Measurement, I think, still some time away, but digital, I think, is still doing a better job versus other mediums, which is led by sampling. Telcos remain to be a main part of the distribution ecosystem. That's where, things are as things stand. And of course, tech investments have scaled up, and with time, I think a lot of the homegrown and the local OTTs also will kind of continue to invest in tech in a very big way and learn from the global giants which are there. So I think I would like to end the panel on that note. There are no questions as such, from the audience as such. So thank you all for taking your time out. And on behalf of TVO Media, it's been a pleasure to have you on the video stream summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.